Everything we're about to say, we're only pretending to know a lot about and are still figuring most of it out. So take it with a word of caution.
Or a grain of salt. Salt this advice liberally. Today we're gonna make a video telling you guys how we tell stories. Now, this is something that people can go on forever and ever on. You guys might disagree with us, but that's cool. We're just telling you what we learned. For me, the first thing I keep in mind is what is my goal of telling a story? For us, it's getting people to watch. We make YouTube videos. Ask yourself the next question then is, why is somebody going to watch it? Why is somebody going to watch Gravity Gun? Well, they are a fan of Half-Life 2, and they are familiar with the Gravity Gun, and there are not that many quality Half-Life fan films out there.
Once the video starts, you have to start addressing those. So why not start it off with a really cool shot of a gunship sweeping overhead? Right there, you've already set up, boom, this is as big as it sounds. Second of all, it's hitting the kind of quality that I'd expect from some sort of cinematic, like movie version of Half-Life 2.
And we go on to create a little plot that people haven't seen before, which is the origin of the Gravity Gun. And we make sure we focus on delivering the story of the Gravity Gun.
In figuring out what is going to drive your video, you essentially are going to be building it with three pieces here. You're going to have the context, which is essentially your introduction, setting everything up. You have pretty much the core of the idea, which is pretty much why you wanted to make the idea in the first place, whether it's an action scene or some crazy effect. And then really, at the end of it, you have your punchline. And these kind of separate sections are really what we've found is like the formula that we're using for our videos. There's a big difference between an idea for a video and the context for a video. For example, the sign spinning video we just released. The actual idea for the video is sign spinners who are really good at spinning signs have a fight with their signs as weapons. The actual context for the piece is what sets up that story about these sign spinners fighting each other. A charming young sign spinner who has his store robbed and must defend himself with that sign. Another example is the glitch. The actual idea is doing glitchy video game character effects such as deformations of the face and clipping through objects and lag. The actual context for the video ended up being two video game characters come across a glitch and don't know how to fix it.
That's the biggest challenge you guys will find in writing a story is you'll get a cool idea and then you got to figure out how to turn that into an actual story. And that's where we spend most of our time writing. So we've talked about how to start your piece, we've talked about how to conceptualize it, how to start shooting it. But at a certain point, you need to write the rest of the story, and ideally you write a compelling story that keeps people interested. How do you do this? It comes down to two things, conflict and intrigue. With conflict and intrigue, that's how you keep the story rolling. So, what does this mean? Well, for example, a person needs something, but there is a problem preventing them from getting it. There's no obvious solution to this problem, but they are going to try. How are they going to do it? Now that's very vague, but you start applying it to things. And when you start applying that to your story, that's when you get the actual interesting plot points and character points and all that kind of stuff.
Glitch is also another good example. While it doesn't seem like there's actually much conflict in the opening piece, there is. It's these characters arguing what to do about this glitch. Nobody has any idea what's going to happen if either decision is made. The intrigue builds once the glitch starts happening because when it starts growing and the guy glitches out and the wall goes, basically that is mysterious. People don't know what's going to be happening now that this glitch is spreading.
In a good story, you have to build from the get-go. Film is a visual medium. When it starts, it needs to be beautiful and pretty. Make that very first picture somebody sees interesting, make it beautiful, make it captivating, because there's no story yet. You are literally only 1 second into the video. There's zero story.
Yeah, and that can be done with the actual quality, the composition, the color correction, set design, whatever, or you can also just tell it by what's happening on screen.
So you're going to start with visual beauty, and then you're going to start introducing very small story elements. Let's go with Brush with Death. We have a beautiful image, and we have a guy who's about to paint over that beautiful image, and it's just a little bite-sized story, but we're going to keep building. Then we have the paint demon come to life and fight off this guy who's about to erase the image. And that's the real story. But that doesn't kick in until like 20, 25 seconds into the piece. And so in those first 20 to 25 seconds, it was key that we presented people with a beautiful image, some small bite-sized story chunks, and intrigue leading into the bigger piece. A picture is worth 1,000 words. Tell a story with your visuals.
Use your camera, dummy.
What do visual traits imply on a character? Does the character have an eye patch? Do they have a beard? Do they have a scar? Are they clean cut? Do they wear a tie? Do they wear a suit? These all mean things. Fill out all these details on all the characters, on the world, in this environment. Where is the camera looking? What's it showing? What are the colors in the scene? Is it bright? Is it dark? Is it warm? Is it cold?
I got into a bad fight yesterday, and you could believe me, or I could just show up wearing a freaking big black eye and a bloody nose, and I don't have to say a thing. People know that it's something, I got beat up doing something.
Also, camera movement is just as important. For example, when the camera moves, it reveals things.
Reveal this.
Well, the camera can focus on things, or it can just simply like punch in on something or like frame something up so it's focused in the center. So camera movement and camera focus, along with what's actually in the scene, is what lets you compose a visual story. So there's one shot in Tether where we're looking at a house and it's covered with frost, and the camera's moving by and we see there's an old rundown car and some random pieces of metal, and there's a yellow pickup truck in the distance, and there's a guy dragging a dead body, and another guy is stepping outside the door, and he looks flabbergasted, like, what happened? That image right there, that single image, tells 1,000 things. We have the environment. It's run down, it's kind of brown, it's cold. We have the house. The house is still in working order, but it's also kind of run down. We have garbage in the front yard. We have an old broken car and other bits of technology that are no longer in use. But we still have a working pickup truck sitting there, parked in the yard, mind you. So clearly, the grass is not an issue with keeping the grass nice. We have a dead body, so somebody probably just got murdered. We have a guy dragging the body, so we have a guy who is probably the guy who murdered that guy. And we have a guy coming out of the house looking shocked, so he probably didn't have anything to do with it and doesn't want to have anything to do with it. Right there, literally just that one picture sets up a ton of stuff. And when you can do that with your shots, you make things incredibly interesting and you make your story so densely packed that people are compelled to watch. You want to make sure you are focusing on what you are trying to tell with your story. It's easy to get lost in tangents and quirks and character details, funny moments. Your actor can make a funny face, so you get them making a lot of funny faces. No. Focus on what you need to tell your story and get to your point.
You actually find out what your story is about by figuring out your ending, because the ending is what everything amounts to in the piece.
You have the character that begins with the problem, they resolve it, they learn something, you have an arc. But there's other types of stories. There's also the story of escalation. Things constantly getting worse or better or bigger or what have you. For a 2-minute video, escalation can be great.
You just need to bring people to a territory they didn't expect to be in by the end of the piece. Case in point, it's the sign spinning video. That video doesn't actually resolve itself. It's not like Clint, best sign spinner in the world, has his store robbed, and then he beats up the robbers and takes the money back. The end. No, that's not the story. The story is Clint, the sign spinner, has his store robbed, goes to fight the thieves, but then one of the other thieves randomly is also a great sign spinner, and they fight. And then randomly, it turns out that Clint's boss, the owner of the pizza shop, is also way better than both of them at spinning signs, and then it ends. So there's not actually resolution to that. But if you think about the escalation there, you're taking an idea and you're evolving it to levels that aren't really quite expected, and you kind of just get your punchline by whatever evolution you decide to end on.
The focus on the piece is the joke of sign spinners doing martial arts with the signs, and that ending of the boss coming out with the big sign and twirling it around and having some spectacle perfectly locks into that focus and wraps up the whole piece in regards to what the whole point of that story was. To wrap things all up, I want to talk about Dungeons & Dragons for a moment.
Dungeons & Dragons is excellent storytelling practice, especially when you're the dungeon or game master.
We really haven't talked about plot. Realistically, because plot is a byproduct of everything else. Plot is not how you start writing a story. Plot is what happens after you've written the story. The best Dungeons & Dragons game happened when we had all created interesting characters with their own opinions, beliefs, motivations, backstories, and they weren't necessarily the same between each one. They could conflict. You need to put them in a situation that challenges them and puts them either at odds with each other or at odds with the situation, or ideally both. And then you step back and you see what happens.
Exactly.
The characters drive the plot. The plot does not drive the characters. And that's what we learned from playing Dungeons & Dragons. Create characters, the beliefs and opinions and skills and all this kind of stuff. The situation is then informed by what the character wants and desires, and that's when the plot happens, because the character then takes action.
It's very easy to get caught up with, I want this scene to happen, I want things to go down like this. Very often you'll find yourself struggling to create those scenes because it doesn't make sense for why it should happen. And what you need to do is go back to these characters, these people who are in it, look at everything else that's led up to this point for them, and ask yourself, is this what they should be doing? Or what would they realistically be doing here?
If a character makes a decision that does not make sense, the people watching the video suddenly realize that character is a construct and not a real person, and the illusion is lost.
Boom. It's no longer a story. It's just a bunch of actors. We're always trying to figure this stuff out for ourselves here. This is just kind of what we've learned to this point. There's many exceptions to all these rules, and you kind of just have to see for yourself where things go.
We try to read pretty much all the comments, especially for like the first couple days when the video's out. Leave us detailed feedback. We love reading it. Are you going to hit us up on Twitter with your thoughts? Or Facebook, which we don't quite read as frequently, but we post a lot of updates there. Anyways, guys, thanks for watching. See you later.